Welcome, everybody, to Casting for Two, the podcast with your host, Chris. I am always that guy, your host. Very happy to host this show that I created and do everything on. Yeah, no biggie. No Jason Biggs. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 175. Only 25 away from the big 200 that I'll hit this year. I don't know what I should do for 200. So if you would like to tweet me, Instagram me, or email me what I should do for episode 200, feel free to do so. My Twitter and Instagram are both at castingfor2, and you can send me an email, castingfor2@gmail.com. Maybe I'll do something special. Maybe I won't. Who knows? I mean, maybe I'll have a guest on that was in the earlier years. I don't know. No idea. But we'll see. I would like to, again, thank the fine people over at Secret Stage Productions for hosting the other podcast that I do called Sunday Brunch with Megan Johnson of tipsywriter.com. I can't say enough good things about her and the podcast. It's a real fun time at the movies, and you guys should listen to it because we enjoy it. And you would too. So there. And speaking of movies, this is a perfect segue into my guest for today. My guest is Alan J. Whiticker, and he is an author who happened to have wrote a book. I know, crazy, right? Authors writing books, super crazy. But he actually wrote a book compiling all the best movies, the greatest films from the 20th century. And everyone knows I love movies and I love film, and I really enjoyed chatting with him, and I still have to get the book. I'm sorry, Alan, I will get the book. I really will, and then I'll send you a picture of it. But for now, let's get into this episode. So sit back, relax, and Chris, cue the music, please.
Chris, how you doing? Nice to talk to you through the wonders of the internet.
I know, it's nice. I was a little scared because I got an international phone number.
Yeah.
But I didn't know which nation to put it under. So I was just, he's Australian, let's go Australia.
Yeah.
But yeah, it all worked out.
That's good. Now, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. How is your day going so far?
It's good. It's pretty hot here. It's about 37 degrees, which is about 98 on the old scale. So it's quite warm in Sydney at the moment, but not too bad at all.
There we go.
First day of summer.
There we go. Is it now, do you do much traveling to the States or anything like that?
I haven't. Well, I was in Las Vegas and L.A. this time last year with a couple of friends, and it was very mild. It was lovely, actually.
Right.
A bit chilly at Las Vegas, but L.A. is always nice.
Because it must be a little weird, being on the other side of the world and having different seasons, and then you come, to America, and it's just, it should be summer right now. What's going on?
Well, I go to Europe a lot because the publishing company, we go to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and we've got an office in London. So, if you can put up with the 24-hour plane ride, you can put up with any weather when you arrive.
There you go. That's what makes you stronger. A 24-hour plane ride. Yeah.
We're not very close, unfortunately, but it makes the trip that much more worthwhile.
There we go. I love the idea of traveling. I just hate the process of it. So sitting in a small airplane seat would drive me crazy.
I am. I'm acclimatized. I quite like airports. I think airports, they function really well.
Yeah.
And there's security and whatever. But I find airports very relaxing. I can sit and read, and as long as you can suspend your disbelief that you're actually 35,000 feet in the air in a pressured tube, you can enjoy it. Once you start thinking about where you actually are, I always think that I'm just in a train.
Yeah.
Always helps me.
There you go. I remember it was the first time I was flying alone, and I was sitting next to this older gentleman who, was trying to buy me a beer, which now that I'm saying it might be a little inappropriate, but whatever. But we were sitting in the front, and he said, if this plane goes down, we're all the first to die. And I was just, why would you say that? I was 18 at the time. I was like, why would you tell me that? I don't want to hear that. So.
Yeah, a bit too much information is dangerous. The less information, the better. I like to put a movie on and just chill out and or read a magazine. I can read a whole magazine. It takes me, good 12 to 14 hours to read it cover to cover. So I pick up a Vanity Fair or something and I just go for it.
There we go. Nice. So this is Casting for Two. It started. It's a very loose and casual chat.
Right.
But one of the things I am interested in is you're an author. You've written lots of books. When was there a point in your life when you said, this is something I want to do?
Well, my background is in education. I became a school teacher at 21. I was in primary school education. I was an assistant principal for 10 years. And each summer I do a little project. I do a little writing project. We have a sport over here in Australia called rugby league, which is professional rugby, 13-man side, not 15-man side. And I started off as doing freelance sports writing. And just over the years, I sort of got a few books behind me, and I got fairly well known, but always still teaching because, unfortunately, the life of any artist, and I mean that very broadly, if you're a musician or a painter or if you're a writer, it's very much hand to mouth. It's very difficult to earn a living, especially when you've got a wife and two little kids and a mortgage and all that sort of stuff. So I taught for years and years and years and just wrote on the side. But then I started to branch out from sport and started to write about true crime, history, pop culture, which I'm really interested in, being a child of the 60s and 70s, and I really wanted to explore those aspects, and I realised that one was taking over the other, so I took a couple of years off teaching, see if I could make a go of it, and then my publisher, who publishes all my work, she said, look, why don't you come on board as a commissioning editor and find authors for us, and you can also handpick 3 or 4 projects you want to do a year. So it's really the best of both worlds.
Okay, right on. And so, because you have a new book out, and it's 20 of the greatest movies in is it the 60s or just period?
It's actually hundreds. It's the 20th century.
Oh, yeah, 20th century. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah. Look, it's got about 400 to 500 movies in it, and this book was about what are those films that are, instant classics like Casablanca and Ben-Hur and Gone with the Wind. There's no debate about them. But, well, what are some of the forgotten gems? Now that we've put a line through the 20th century, I thought it was really important, especially for young film fans, to go back and you've got to discover Bogart. You've got to go right back to the beginning. You've got to go back to Jimmy Stewart. You've got to go back to Marilyn Monroe in the 50s and Paul Newman in the 60s and Nicholson in the 70s. So I had got the opportunity to tap into a wonderful collection in London called the Mary Evans Picture Library. And they had, literally tens of thousands of images. And I've been a film fan since I was a kid. So I was able to look at those images that I hadn't seen in wider publication. And I just said to my boss, my publisher, that I think there's a really good book here. And she said, well, off you go. Go and have some fun with it, and what we came up with was a huge, 400-page, 600 film, 500 picture, pathway through classic film in the 20th century. So we're very proud of it, and I think it's a great book, not just a coffee table book, but it's a book you can keep and reread and jump in at any level and learn something about these great films.
And so what was your process of picking out all the movies?
Well, there's a number of criteria already. At the end of the 20th century, the American Film Institute named their top 100 films. So, that's a starting point.
Right.
And then the second filter, I thought, would have been the Academy Awards. Now, not every Academy Award-winning film is a classic.
Right.
But obviously, you've got to put probably the Best Picture winners in there. And I wanted to put some information, some hard information in there, who got the Best Actor Award, the Best Actress Award, who, what director was involved, what actors were involved. So that laid down, and then that gave me a little bit of leeway where I was able to choose many of my favourite films, always, I suppose, linking them back to the research, making sure that other critics, Roger Ebert and Pauline Kael and all these great writers of film criticism over the years, also think these films are classics. And I had a lot of fun opening these films up over a double-page spread and really going behind the scenes. And not it's important not just to tell who's in the film and what happens in the film, but why is it a classic? What's that indefinable thing that makes it a classic film? And usually it's about the history. All these films were made in a context, whether they were made in World War II or the Depression, whether they were key films in certain actors' careers or directors. They really did stand out. And I had to be very careful that I didn't just put some of my favourite films in there. I wanted to be fairly rigid and fairly meticulous, and I think we've got a pretty good balance.
Nice. Now, is there a movie that is one of your favorite movies that you didn't put in the book?
Well, I can't believe, and my wife was very upset with this. There's not an Errol Flynn film in the book, and that was an editing issue. We just had too many films, and probably the last 3 or 4 films that were left out was Robin Hood, which is one of my favourite films, and it's a key Technicolor film from '38 and a key film in Flynn's career. And being Australian, we've always had a close affinity to Flynn here. He's very highly regarded, although his morals were probably not so. But it's disappointing that things like that, and a few British films I would have liked to have put in there, some of the kitchen sink dramas I would have liked to have put in there. But I think this is primarily, and I think your audience would appreciate this, that this is primarily the Hollywood experience, and it's about the dream factory in the 30s, 40s, 50s, the last century, and how some British films did, like David Lean films, Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, and these films did permeate the Hollywood scene, especially in the 60s. But I had to be very careful that I had a good balance. So I'm pretty proud of the book. And look, if anyone's favourite film is not in the book, don't worry, there could be a volume 2 just around the corner.
There you go. One of the styles that I wish would come back is vaudevillian. Yeah. I love... Yeah. I grew up on Three Stooges, pretty much, and then once I got into film school, we had a film history class, and one of the things I saw was the Marx Brothers Night at the Opera. And I was just sold on that, and I knew who the Marx Brothers were, but I didn't really know what kind of material they would do. And every once in a while, when I need a pick me up, I'll just watch it, just because I miss that style.
Well, the Marx Brothers, when I was at university in the 70s, the Marx Brothers were huge. There was a real resurgence. Groucho was still alive.
Yeah, he
was on TV quite a lot. And there was a resurgence. And when you think about it, 30s and 40s went that far back. But I'm amazed how many young people don't know who the Marx Brothers are. And that's disappointing. And hopefully a book like this, and one of my featured films is Duck Soup, which is my favourite Marx Brothers film. I just love the absurdity of the whole thing. And you're right, the setups, look, in all honesty, they're probably just glorified stage plays being filmed. But
right.
the repartee and the wordplay and the jokes were just so, on another level. And I think they still say a lot about today, but maybe with the internet, and film audiences might be a bit more sophisticated. But here in Australia, the Three Stooges are highly revered, mainly because when TV started here in the 60s and 70s, we filled it with a lot of TV shows from the 50s, American TV shows, The Lone Ranger, and Zorro, and I can remember watching all these westerns, and they used to fill a lot of the times with the Stooges, and the Stooges were very, very, people of my generation, quietly revere the Stooges because it was an art form. It was very, you can say it was lowbrow, but it was very clever, and three very distinct characters. And I suppose it was disappointing I couldn't put any Stooges films in this book, but they never did make a major film, did they? They only made shorts.
Right.
And so it's a different genre. If you talk about cult classics, and a lot of films would be cult classics, a lot of actors would be cult classics. But this is pretty much a mainstream experience of Hollywood and classic film.
Yeah, no, and I admire old Hollywood just because it was a time where everything was so fresh and so new, and people weren't afraid to experiment. And nowadays, I'm not saying they don't experiment now, but I mean the technology is just getting more and more advanced. Like doing a jump cut in the 30s was crazy, unheard of. So it's more pure in my eyes.
And that's why Citizen Kane is still revered as a great film, and possibly the greatest film ever made, because Wells and his cameraman Toland, they broke every rule in the book. They just reinvented film, and let's face it, they're probably doing that in Europe at the same time. Although Europe was involved in a world war, the Germans had been doing it with their impressionistic films in the early 30s. But I think any film that is daring in its time holds up really well now, because it's very hard to fix. I'd like to see some more noir films. I'd certainly like to see some more black and white films. I know that sounds a bit crazy, but you can't beat a really good black and white film. Funnily enough, my kids who are now grown up and they're in their 20s, when I used to say to them, "Come and watch this Humphrey Bogart film," they say, "Oh, Dad, it's black and white." You can't turn off a whole history just because they're black and white films. Some of the greatest films ever made were black and whites.
And it's always funny when they take, especially the Three Stooges sketches and put color in it, and it's like, it doesn't look right.
Well, I remember Woody Allen coming out and saying it was terrible what they were doing to the old Capra films. It's a Wonderful Life was colorized by Ted Turner in the 80s, and I think you've got to be fairly protective of these films too. You don't like to see these films cut up and bastardized and changed and whatever. Try and get them in the purest film. The best thing about 21st century technology, of course, is that the restoration of films is fantastic. They're really, especially with digital films, they're really great to watch, and you can almost, in their original format, you can experience them pretty much. And let's face it, the growth of home entertainment now, entertainment systems, you can get as close to the original experience of watching these films. So, look, I would hope people who read this book would start to tick off some of the films, because I remember some of the young designers that were working on this film saying, I haven't seen that film. What's it like? I haven't seen this film. And that's about, if you get your hands on the book, open it up and just start ticking off. Because the great thing is most of these films are now available either on DVD or you can stream them. And one of the things I did do was go back and watch a lot of the silent films, because you can get them on the internet now. And they're mesmerizing. They're wonderful films.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, when you're writing the book, what is the process like for you? Is it something where you're just, yeah, obviously there's a lot of research, but do you kind of have to be in your own bubble? Do you have to be walking around? Although it'd be hard walking around and typing at the same time, but I'm sure
No,
somebody can
look,
do it.
I've got a home office, which
Okay.
I've had for 20 years, and I'm surrounded by books. I'm in here now, looking around on my computer, and just lots and lots of film books. But look, even before the invention of the internet, I collected film books in the 70s and 80s. You're talking about the Marx Brothers. I don't know if you know a book, the Marx Brothers Scrapbook by Richard J. Annabile. I think it was the first book that I ever bought about film, and it had a lot of the Marx Brothers scripts in there as well. And they had little pictures beside of the action, beside the script, so you could follow the action. And I was really keen to build up that library. So, look, it's a case of you've got to, just go for it. You've got to type. You've got to just keep going, powering through, because it's easier to edit 1,000 words than a blank page. So you've just got to write. And usually with most of the films, I just made up a conscious decision. Well, what do I want to say about this film? And like Gone with the Wind, I didn't want to feature Gone with the Wind too highly, even though it's a great film, it's a classic film, because there's been whole books written on Gone with the Wind.
Right.
So I didn't want to give my 1,000-word sense to what it is. And I think Gone with the Wind is one of those films that is dated pretty poorly. A lot of the acting is very overdramatic, and great filmmaking, great Technicolor filmmaking for the period. But the story is very soap opera-ish, I find. I saw it 30 years ago when it was re-released, and I thought even then it had dated pretty well. And I've got my own copy, and I watched it again to make sure I wasn't being disingenuous. But I think that's with a lot of which films have stood the test of time, which films still have something to say to an audience, which films have dated poorly but are still highly regarded. And I wanted to say something original, because there's no point just saying who's in the film and what the film's about. Why is this film a classic? Why should people give up a couple of hours of their time to revisit this film? And I particularly love the films of the 60s and 70s, because they're the films I grew up with.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm curious, is there a movie made within the last 20 years that you feel like could stand next to a lot of these great classic movies?
Well, that's a really good question, because that's why we ended the book in 1999. We just stopped, because I really think that it takes a good 20 years for a film to be a classic.
Right.
I don't think there's been an instant classic. The only two I can think of in the 90s that were instant classics, the year that they were brought out, was Schindler's List.
Okay.
Just defies criticism. Just superb filmmaking by Spielberg, and I can be very critical of Spielberg because he is manipulative, he is over emotional sometimes, but he's wonderfully restrained in that film. The film every frame looks $1 million because it's in black and white. Mm-hmm. And I think the only other film from the 90s, and I'm only talking about Hollywood films too.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's lots of foreign films that are classic films, but this book is not about that. The only other film that I think is a classic because it is so influential is David Fincher's Seven, with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. When you have a look at a lot of horror movies since Seven, and it's now 20 years since it came out, even the credits at the beginning of the film, even the music, even the look of the film, the darkness of the film, the dark subject matter of the film, it's so influential. So many films have tried to recreate that whole vibe, and I think it's probably Fincher's best film. I'm a big fan of David Fincher. I love The Social Network.
Yeah.
I thought Zodiac was a very good film.
Yeah.
But I think Seven is a instant classic, and it's so well written, and the payoff is just no happy endings for anybody.
There you go. So for the people at home who would like to keep up with what you do, also purchase the book, where can they do that?
Well, you can probably get it online if they go to good online websites. I'm sure you'll be able to get the book. The book is available in North America. We've got wonderful people called Midpoint who are distributing the book for us. So even though I'm talking to you on the other side of sunny Australia, this book if you really want to get it, you'll be able to find it. And I think what I'm most proud about the book is that it's 100 years of film history in one little book. And I think it's a great starting point for not only people who want to learn something about films, but also if they want to rediscover, why these films were so great. Many of these films I've forgotten about, but it was great fun going back and watching them all.
Right on. Well, Alan, I had a blast chatting with you. I feel like we can chat more about film, but I'll have to have you back on again for sure.
Mate, I'd love to talk to you again in the future, and all the best to the people in America. May you live in interesting times, and they're very interesting times at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's another subject for another time.
Absolutely. Hope. It's 4 years, right? What's 4 years?
Well, I think sometimes things have a way of surprising you too. So let's not be overly pessimistic.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And you can always immigrate to Australia if you get jack of it.
There we go. Well, Alan, you have a wonderful rest of your day, okay?
All the very best. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Cheers.